Oh, okay.
All right, do you see that?
Yes, it looks like a cryptic language.
Well, it's just 9 dots and a square with one below it.
Okay.
Do you see that?
Yes.
So the problem is that represents the minimum amount of muscle tissue that you need to have to be able to actually function. Okay, so do you see the second picture? Let me get a better way. There we go.
Yes, I see side
See the
by
second picture? So let's say that's somebody who's starting to learn. That's supposed to be 10% of the muscle tissue.
Okay.
And I've actually got 2, 4, 6. Okay, I have 8 out of the 10 muscle fibers. That means that can't be used constant use. Right?
Yes.
Now, that means that I'm only going to have 2, and then it would randomly switch in 2 other, right? Do you see how that's working? That's not functional. The problem you have right now is you're lighting those 10 dots up individually, but they can't alternate with anything because there's times when you activate all 10 and it's not strong enough to do anything.
Yes.
So then they're fatigued. This little incremental improvement that you're getting is you're starting off there, and then the next time what you end up with that, right? So now you have 3 open, right? You see that? So now I have 3 random open. I'm still not at a point where I have sustainability. You're going to have to continue that process until you get to here.
Okay.
Okay, because once I get half on, half off, I have the ability to have enough randomization, because again, it randomizes, right? It'll not be the same connected, but half on, half off. That's what you need to be able to sustain for more than 30 seconds.
Gotcha.
Okay, after that, and what's funny is, at this point, what you're doing is still reinforcing muscle tissue, because the problem that you're having, all of this is still wrong. What you need is to eventually get where they can fire independently without reinforcement.
Okay, I see.
Does that make sense? Because
Yes.
right now you're having to have multiple fibers firing together to get anything to activate.
Yes.
That's not how they're designed to be used. Once you get that, you start being able to have the reinforcement, because you have to strengthen the individual muscle fibers to the point where one muscle fiber acting independently actually has some sort of an effect, even if you're having half of your muscle fibers fire at once. Then Then your body will start doing this.
Oh, okay. Yes, I see that.
Now you have more muscle fibers. So now, if I have 10%, now I start having, if I'm having half, what was half of the muscles going before, right? If I do 5 of that, that's now only a quarter.
Yes.
And that reinforces again half of that. And it's not until you get that as each time that muscle mass is doubling, right? So I started with 10, then I went to 20. When I'm at 40, right? You have to get your muscles developed to the point where you have that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
At that point, using those same muscles, until you get to that, you don't have sustainability all day long.
Or even for minutes.
Right. Well, no, I'm not talking about him. And so what will happen is at that point, you will have the ability to activate it with no resistance all day long. How often do we have no resistance?
Never.
Often. So then when you have that much, when you're ending up having to reinforce, meaning I can activate it, but when there's resistance, the resistance then creates ties, and now I start tying together. But I have multiple, so I'm now using initial activation, and then the amount required to overcome resistance starts tying other muscle fibers near it to be able to create stronger bundles. That creates a reinforcement protocol based on how many are being reinforced over time. But at that point, you're not really getting an exponential growth, right? You're getting a sine curve growth at that point. Put the marker back. So that sine curve growth, that's why in the beginning it doesn't feel like anything's happening. Even though you'll feel results that will feel like they're faster, you're doing more work now, but you're doing it because you're not overdoing it, correct?
Yes.
He is treating it like a stabilizer muscle, and he tells you correctly, don't try and push as hard as you can, barely activate it.
Yes, because that was my mistake. Even though I knew not to do that, that was what I wanted to do initially. Try and get down as hard as it would go. And then, yeah. I see that that's not effective.
So that's kind of what we're trying to be able to do for all of those ankle, each one of those separate ankle isolations you're having to go through.
Yes.
You haven't really had that, and then because you had to be careful and you haven't moved around as much, there hasn't been as much resistance. So even what you did have hasn't had the same resistance on an ongoing basis. So starting to be able to build those protocols up, part of what you're going to see is with the exercise you started doing first, right? You said one leg would shake.
Well, both do, but it's amazingly...
No. Initially, only one leg shook.
The right one.
Correct. Let's think about it. Which leg had a longer period of isolation where you couldn't use it at all?
The right.
Correct. So, because that was isolated, that was the one that was in the boot. There is nothing. It's being outwardly stabilized. So there's even less passive resistance. So that one shook first, right? Then, now you're actually getting closer to your initial activation, which is why it's balanced. Now the strength is even between the two. You need to balance being able to go back and forth. So you actually now have a balance, which is part of what you need and why those are set up the way they are. It's really good PT training because it's training you to train it at the same time. Right? As you keep having to go through the different exercises, right? When he trains you to try and compress, right? When he tells you to try and does he do it where he tells you, now good, now I want you to leave your toes in place. I want you to push your heels in.
Yes.
Different set of muscles, right?
And we have different sets of those, like blue squares that are kind of soft, spongy, but balancy, but they have different thicknesses so that different parts of your foot can touch harder ones so that you can really work on pushing the big toe down, but not pushing other parts.
All kinds of stuff. And he's looked at all of those different muscular exercise things that I gave, and he's like, oh, I have tools for this. I have tools for this. Right?
Tools that make my toes cry, yes.
Right. And what's the one that you love most?
What I love most of all?
Which one were they like? Yeah.
Well, you asked what one I love the most. I like that I'm starting to be able to move the toe. Like I can start to actually make them not move at the same time as each other. Like before, it was like I couldn't get any type of segregation between any of them.
Right. You can separate your toes. You can squeeze them together. You can make a wave, just like you can do this with your fingers.
Yeah, the fourth and the fifth are still a struggle. They kind of lump themselves together.
But you're starting to actually have control over your ankles and feet.
Yes. And then he always reminds me to say, because then I'll say, well, I feel like I can't get very much movement at the ankle the way I'm supposed to. And then he'll say, well, tell me what that means. And I'll laugh and I'll tell him how you can always place it and put it where it needs to be because I can't get it there on my own. And I'm like, when Lowell does that, I feel a lot more because I know where it needs to be. I just can't get it there. He's like, oh, you mean like this? And he smashes it down. And I look at him, gave him a look. He goes, I bet Lowell got that look too. Yeah, I go, yeah, that's it. That's the max motion. That's what I need. He's like, yeah, I know. You're not going to get that on your own for a while because it's like a struggle to get this much. But you both have been good about that. That helps to hear about the timeline because you know me. I think everything has to be in light years, and that if I don't get there, I don't get fast enough.
The thing is you have to. The reason I showed that, and you can show him that board is. And this is what he meant when he was saying you have nothing. You don't have the minimum amount of muscle fibers that can be activated for you to be successful.
Yes.
Then you'll be able to be successful, but without any resistance. You also have a separation of success. So what's resistance? Resistance is your range of motion, right? Mm-hmm. How much resistance is there? Well, as I develop my power, I'm also going to be developing my range of motion. When he pushed down and got you to your maximum range of motion, how much resistance did he overcome through your body? A lot.
Yeah, it was like going through molasses.
Correct. So that molasses is what's having to be overcome by this little tiny set of muscles that you just started learning how to do.
That's fair.
So, did you think about it that way? So that first what you're having to do is multiply the initial amount of muscular strands because they don't all engage at once, right? And since they're trying to fire, they can't do a pattern because ideally what you would have is if you have 10 muscle fibers, it's tick, 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 tick. This is really the way that the stabilizer muscles are designed to work. Is it's this random firing. Constantly going over the different, right? Well, when you have to use all but one of your fingers and then all but two of your fingers, it's hard for you to differentiate between what's happening because you still don't get the result that you're looking for.
Yes.
But by activating it properly,
it's laying down foundational.
And that vibration that you're feeling is when if you're only trying to engage them, you can't get, if a tenth of the muscle can't get an engagement, right? It's like, I need to engage. So it's more than a tenth of the muscle. It's you just have to, and the only reason we're holding it, but you notice we're not trying to push it to a max. We're just barely trying to get it to engage. Because that barely, almost like a car that won't quite turn over, that's what's sending those protocols out. At this point, all we're trying to do is get electricity flowing to the area over a sustained period of time to get the RNA reinforcement protocol active.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
And then it's going to send reinforcements. So lots of protein. Lots of protein. We're also trying to be able to get those electrical pathways drilled down because these are electrical pathways you've never used. Imagine never using your hands or your wrist. Imagine never using your wrist or your fingers, right? Your hands have only been in this shape. Better yet, they've only been in this shape. And now I tell you, I'm going to teach you to type 100 words a minute. Right? So I've got to start being able to. No, that's a shortcut. It's going to damage your upper leg. I've got to teach you to be able to independently move your fingers. I've got to be able to teach you to articulate your wrist in each one of these different directions. I have to teach you how to use, because did you know, just like your foot, there's some wrist actions that the way that you actually turn your wrist this way is by controlling your pinky. If your hand is in a fist, you actually still turn your pinky to get your wrist to turn. To get it to go the other way, you use your thumb. Right? If you have your hand this way, right? No matter how much pressure somebody puts on your pinky, if you keep your thumb down, it might break your pinky, but it won't turn, but your hand won't turn. Now, if I move my thumb, unless you can stop this portion of my thumb from moving, you can't stop my wrist from turning over.
Huh. I never thought of that.
Right? Lifting my thumb. So my thumb and my pinky are what actually control my wrist movement. My pinky has more control over my wrist than my pinky toe does over my foot. Because this starts having if I go harder, I'm resisting that with my thumb, right? And I can have some independent movement. Right?
I feel that. I do feel that.
Yeah.
No, that's hugely helpful. I really appreciate that. It recalibrates what I need to hear when I'm thinking I'm not getting far.
Your initial goal on all of these is actually just getting enough muscle fibers generated in the appropriate type and style that you can start having just a 10% engagement, not even to move the band, just to feel resistance at the edge of the band. Your goal shouldn't be to move it.
Okay. I need to change that. I'm with you now.
Moving it, you're adding extra muscular tie-ins that are just going to fatigue you faster, and it's not helping you. If you want to be able to sustain it further, you want to engage at the minimum, and the minimum initially is going to be feeling pressure against the band without moving it.
Okay.
I want you to specifically tell Randy, I said this, so he will yell at you appropriately.
I appreciate that.
Show him. Did you video the diagrams I wrote?
I
right?
did.